Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's presentation on saving the oaks, restoring oak savannas at Fontenelle Forest. My name is Promise, and I'm an AmeriCorps member serving with Conservation Nebraska's Common Ground program. Conservation Nebraska's mission is to protect our state's natural legacy by educating the public, supporting communities, and increasing civic engagement. We accomplish this through locally led education efforts and community engagement projects that address local conservation concerns across Nebraska. Before tonight's presentation begins, I'd like to go over a few quick items. All attendees will remain muted and cameras will stay off throughout the presentation. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the Q&A. We will answer questions either throughout the presentation or during the Q&A session afterwards. Tonight's presentation is being recorded and will be uploaded to Conservation Nebraska's YouTube page within the next couple of weeks. So if you miss a part of the presentation and want to revisit it later or would like to share it with others, you'll be able to find it there. Following the presentation, we will launch a very brief survey that should be less than a minute to complete. These surveys help support programming like this, so we truly appreciate you taking the time to fill it out. If anyone attending tonight is interested in speaking with a Conservation Nebraska team member regarding conservation issues in Nebraska, or if you simply like to learn more about our work, I'll place our email in the chat. All right. So tonight we are excited to welcome Michelle Foss from Fontenelle Forest, who will be speaking with us about oak woodland restoration. Michelle is the Director of Operations at Fontenelle Forest and is a lifelong student of natural systems of the environment. She grew up in Fort Collins, Colorado, exploring the foothills, short grass prairies, and nearby waterways while hiking and biking as often as possible. As an adult, Michelle has lived in all four corners of the United States and earned her bachelor's degree in environmental science from the University of Nebraska at Albany. She has volunteered with numerous nonprofit organizations focused on youth programs, education museums, and environmental stewardship. At Fontenelle Forest, Michelle has helped grow the habitat restoration program and brings more than 13 years of prescribed fire experience. She currently oversees land stewardship and facility operations, serves on the senior leadership team, and represents Fontenelle Forest on several statewide organizations. Please join me in welcoming Michelle Foss. All right, Michelle, you can take it away.
Thank you, Promise. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to start out with just a brief introduction to the organization of Fontenelle Forest. For those of you who don't know, Fontenelle Forest is an organization that has been around for quite a while. We are a nonprofit. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, which means we are funded by donations as well as memberships and admissions and program fees. We were founded in 1913 as an organization. However, the history of the land started long before that. So the pictures on your screen are some of our entry points. Neil Woods, which is in North Omaha, just north of Hummel Park and NP Dodge Park. Our main nature center here in Bellevue. Our wetlands, half of which of our trails are currently closed due to a wildfire. Camp Wakanda, which is our southernmost entry point, and Camp Brewster, which is a program area and a rental space. So some of our earliest documented history can be traced back to the 1100 to 1400s, and this would be what is termed the Nebraska phase culture. So in 1912 to about 1920, an amateur archaeologist named Robert Gilder excavated several earth lodges on site. So in the boundaries of Fontenelle Forest and Neil Woods, there are over 77 earth lodge sites. In 1998, another couple of earth lodges were also excavated on site by Dr. Eric Kaldal. In the 1830s, the original site for the city of Bellevue was also located within the boundaries of Fontenelle Forest. So I want you to take a good look at both of these paintings because I want you to notice the distinct lack of trees in both of these. Back in the early 1800s, also take a look at the river, see how wide it is back then. It does not look like that now. We use historical documentation and land use records, as well as tree cores, to help us determine the land use history, because what the land used to look like and how the land used to be is a clue to how the work that we are doing now tells us kind of how we want it to go in the future as well. In 1972, there was an excavation at the trading post site by the Nebraska State Historical Society. So by the early 1900s, there were quite a few more trees in the area. So by 1920, the area that you can see in the picture was owned by Fontenelle Forest, and there were hiking trails on site. So we don't actually know exactly where the area known as Child's Point was. That was designated in 1909, but this is a picture from it. The river looks very different now because in the 1930s it was channelized and essentially moved from the original channel location. So it's very difficult to determine where this picture was taken from where things are now. So this is the same tree from 1917, 2017, and 2026. So we call this the Constitution tree because it was one of the few trees on site that was alive when the Constitution was signed. However, this tree was started its life approximately 1730, 1751 based on tree core data. So this tree is nearly 300 years old. This is a bur oak tree out on the third loop of our boardwalk, and it is one of our reference trees that we use in photographs that kind of showcase some of the restoration work we're doing. You can see in 1917 that it was more open around this bur oak tree, which is the type of habitat that bur oaks were typically grown in, and that's the type of habitat bur oaks prefer. And you can see in 2017 that there are a lot more trees and it's a lot more grown up around. You can see in 2026 that it's a lot more open again, and that's because between 2017 and 2026, we did a lot of thinning and we had done several prescribed fires. In 2015, after noticing over the years that there was a lot of tree and shrub encroachment, we started our Save the Oaks initiative. So we had realized that there were a lot of things going on that seemed to be detrimental to the health of the environment that we have on site. We were seeing a lot of shade tolerant canopy and subcanopy and understory, and that it was becoming a monoculture or a habitat that was not supportive of a wide variety of plants and animals. We were seeing invasion of exotic plants and a lot of invasives coming in that were making it harder for native plants and animals to thrive. And we were seeing little native vegetative regeneration, specifically the bur oak trees that we know from that historic documentation that used to be here. There was a huge lack of diversity at all levels of the entire system. So from insects and plants to our mammals and our birds, we were noticing that we were starting to lose species at an alarming rate. So in 2015, we wrote a large grant to the Nebraska Environmental Trust to start up a large program that included staff, it included training, it included equipment, and outreach and education for the public on oak woodland restoration and habitat management for Fontenelle Forest. So some of the benefits of restoration include both ecological and social benefits. And this is something that we had to do a lot of research ahead of time to basically prove our case. One of the biggest hurdles that we had to overcome at the beginning of our grant and at the beginning of our habitat initiative was that people saw green and thought, well, green is good. You plant a bunch of trees and you're going to save the earth. And what we were finding is that the more trees there were, the less diversity and the less healthy the habitat actually was. So we were noticing that there was a lot of soil erosion in our hills. So we have a very powdery, flowery type of soil that was very highly erodible by both wind and water. And we were losing soil pretty badly between our trails and the steepness of the hills. And having these trees was not helpful for that. We needed more grasses, we needed more flowers, and we needed more space between the trees for these things to grow and hold the soil in place. We needed a lot more diversity in our plants and in our animals in order to make the system work better. So it's not that we didn't need the trees that we had, we just needed different trees as well. We needed a thicker layer of our soil organic matter. And we were finding that with that soil erosion, we were losing that organic matter too. So we also were noticing that we didn't have the fungi that we should have. So with all of these things that we were realizing weren't in place, we were doing some research in other areas that had similar habitat based on the land use history that we had that had been done by one of our former staff members who did his master's thesis on the land use history back in the 1970s. So we already had the data of what the land used to look like. So we knew that our habitat on the tops of our hills and on our south and west facing slopes was supposed to be open oak woodlands and oak savannas that then transitioned into the prairie, which is what most of our state is. So we knew that we had a much higher diversity of habitat types across the property, and we had lost that. So we were very concerned that we had all of these issues that could be solved had we had the proper habitat types. So when we were looking into what other areas that have these same habitat types were doing, we found that some of the tools that they used were prescribed fire. And some of the most efficient things that or one of the most efficient controls of some of these invasive species and these trees that were growing in these areas that weren't supposed to have trees was also prescribed fire. So we found that with increased prescribed fire or reapplication of historical fire, we would have more native regeneration. When you open up the canopy in woodlands on hilltops in the west and south facing slopes that we would have, you get an increase in grasses and flowers, which then hold that soil better. You also can see the wildlife better, including birds and deer, and the insects that should be there. You get better breezes, which means it's a little less hot on those steamy days. And the science says that you get fewer mosquitoes. Another interesting fact that's come out since we've started this project is that the ticks are also reduced with prescribed fire. We're pretty excited about that one too. So we've also seen an increase in the diversity in the habitat when you implement prescribed fire. So one of the things that we are trying to do is create a mosaic of habitats. The whole thing shouldn't be oak savannas or oak woodlands. We have a variety of habitats from our floodplain up through a forested area into our ravines, through oak woods, to the savannas, to the prairies. So we should have a bunch of different habitats that mix together to create a diversity that we had lost with the lack of historical processes. So with the lack of the historical processes such as fire and large grazers and the flooding that would have been with the natural channel of the river, because humans decided to change how that worked, we decided to come in and change that by mechanical processes and chemical processes and implementing prescribed fire. So we do restoration with various techniques. So some of our invasive species control is done through a couple of different things. So last summer, we tried a new technique called solarization. So in one of the pictures, you can see that we used a tarp over an area up at Neil Woods that has a plant called leafy spurge. And the idea here is to solarize it or kill it with heat and sunlight over a long period of time, most of the growing season, and it will sterilize the soil and kill all the seeds. The problem with that is it also kills everything around it, and it takes a long time. And you have to keep the plastic from blowing away and from washing away. So it's not always successful and it's not always easy to do. So what we found this growing season is that it worked really well where the tarp stayed down. It didn't work so well where the tarp came back up. In this area that we chose to try this, there wasn't anything else growing except invasive plants, so we weren't concerned about harming anything else in the area, which is fine. But if we're going to do this again, we've got to come up with a better way to keep the tarp held down. With our winds and with our severe storms, this was a very difficult thing to implement. Another method of invasive species control we use is brush cutting. So in the bottom picture, you can see one of our interns using a brush cutter on sweet clover. So one of the things we do is we cut down the invasive plant in between flowering and seeding to prevent it from going to seed and minimizing how much it spreads. Another technique we use is hack and squirt, where we hack into the woody plant, either a tree or a shrub, and we spray targeted herbicide on that particular plant and minimize the spread of that herbicide. So these are all examples of mechanical thinning that we use. The top right picture is a technique called girdling, where we will use a chainsaw and cut around a tree to cut through the living layer of the tree and hopefully kill it while it stands. That provides dead standing habitat for birds and insects, while also minimizing the shock to the canopy so that it doesn't open up too quickly. We also use a skid steer mower to try to mow down invasive brush and overgrown brush. We use brush cutters, which are like circular saw blades on a stick to get rid of some brush too. And then the other picture is another view of hack and squirt, where we use a hatchet to hack into the tree and spray the herbicide.
Learning, that's the learning unit. They're gonna get back in contact. Woo! Whoa, get the heat on this slope. That's right.
So that's a video of one of our oak woodland fires. As you can see, it doesn't move terribly quickly, and it's not really a very tall flame length. And it also doesn't consume everything. So these are all the way it's supposed to go. For the most part, we let fire go where it wants to, and that is why we call it prescribed fire and not a controlled burn. We keep fire in the box by creating fire breaks and removing fuel from the break so that fire stays where we want it to and doesn't go past where we want it to. So in the oak woodlands, we are able to create fire breaks that are not terribly wide, and we maintain our fire breaks all year round. So part of our work for every season is to continually check our fire breaks. We use brush cutters for that. We use tractors when we can. We have to use chainsaws to cut trees when they fall over our fire breaks. So we're constantly monitoring and checking our fire breaks to make sure that they're clear and that we don't have any fuel that could burn across our fire breaks, so that we are making sure that our fire breaks are always open and clear so that when it's time for a fire, we're ready to go.
Hi, Michelle. We do have
Yeah.
2 questions currently in the chat.
Okay.
One asked, in degraded understories, what do you do to bring diversity back to those stands?
Great question, because I forgot to mention that once we remove the invasives, we also interseed or overseed, interchangeable terms. So when we get the invasives out of there, either the invading shrubs or like the honeysuckle or the sweet clover, whatever it is, and we have that bare soil, assuming it's soil and not just dirt, we do put out high diversity seed mixes. So either seeds that we've collected ourselves from the area or seed that we've purchased. So that's how we get things to grow again.
The next question is, what technique do you use in spring now to treat unwanted woody vegetation with herbicide, particularly invasive saplings?
Good question. It depends on how big they are and what exactly they are. If they don't resprout, we just cut them. If they tend to resprout, we do cut stump spray. So we'll cut it either with the brush cutter or sometimes loppers. And then we use a broadleaf specific targeted herbicide, and we'll just put a little bit of herbicide right on the top of the stump so that there's not herbicide spraying everywhere, and it's just very targeted to the individual stump of whatever we're cutting.
And then the last question we have right now is, can dead standing trees be dangerous falling on someone who is walking by?
Yes. So we have 24 miles of trails between the 2 properties. So where we do our hack and squirt and our girdling, we have learned not to do it real close to the trail, or if we're going to do it close to the trail, we have to cut those trees before they become a hazard. So yes, leaving dead standing trees, you have to pick and choose where you do that. So we don't do that close to our trails anymore. So one of the questions that we get isn't fire bad for the land or for individuals? And the short answer is it can be, especially for individuals in the fire. So the way that we tend to look at it is that there are short-term negative impacts, but there are long-term positive impacts. So if you are worried about the short-term negative impacts all the time, you're going to end up missing out on long-term positive impacts. So if you think about the overall health of the entire system, an oak system is dependent on fire in order to have a healthy system. Fire helps to recycle nutrients into the soil. It helps to reduce invasives, and oaks are actually fire adapted. And so are all of the other plants that go along with oaks. So this type of a system actually relies on fire to help keep it healthy. So one of the things that we do is we have different timings. We don't always do fire at the exact same time and at the exact same intensity for every fire we do. The intensity tends to be pretty low, especially for oak fires, as you saw in the video, and it tends to be pretty patchy. So there are various reasons for that. Either there's a log in the way and the fire slows down, or there's a patch of grass, or there's different leaves that don't catch on fire very easily. So there's different things that allow for refugia for insects or overwintering, things that are in the soil, different fungi spores, different things like that, so that things can still regenerate. So there are different things built into the system so that fire in general, at the lower intensities that prescribed fire is typically done at, is not catastrophic. But in order to know for sure what is actually happening, you have to track those changes over time. So we monitor those impacts. And what we did is we set up a monitoring protocol starting in 2015. And we started with vegetation and insects, and we started with a reference point or a baseline, what we have, and kind of a, well, what should we have, and kind of looking at that part. And then you recheck that, and you have to decide, okay, how long do we go before we check the original baseline? And then, okay, what did we expect? And now how do we change what we're doing? So this is a map of the third loop of our boardwalk. And that blue dot is the Constitution tree that we saw earlier. And you can see a couple of lines on here, and those are different transects that are part of our surveys. So the green line is the plant survey transect, and that is 100 meters that our surveyors walk and look at the plants and identify them and count them, and then analyze to check the difference over the years. The red lines are part of our insect survey transects, and the insect surveys are done a little bit differently. They're not just walked and ID'd specifically. There's a couple of different types of insect surveys that are done. But we tried to keep them in the same groupings so that we can compare together our plants and insects. So we did our baseline over a couple of years in 2015, 16, and 17. We had 10 transects at Fontenelle and 6 at Neil Woods. And we started our first repeat in 2025, and we'll do another one in 2026. So what we do is, because we only have a small number of transects, we actually, to get a statistically significant number of points, we did it over a couple of seasons. So our baseline was done over 3 seasons, and our check will be done over 2 seasons. So we've got season 1 done. Season 2 is coming up this year. So for our interim report, we've already got some interim results. So between our baseline and our first interim report, we have all but one transect, so one line at Fontenelle Forest with an improved conservation value, and 4 out of our 6 at Neil Woods with an improved conservation value of plants. So what that means is that the quality of our plants has improved at both locations. So that doesn't tell us a ton, but in the 10 years from when we started restoration to now, it does show that there have been some positive changes. So garlic mustard was one of our tough invasives when we started our Save the Oaks initiative in 2015. We were pulling it, we were spraying it. We had acre plots of this invasive that was brought over from Europe as a garden plant. It was used in salads. It was horrible. And it was significantly lower in every managed transect except for the one that it was already low in. So that was very exciting. So the concluding remark in the interim report was basically that there are some shifts, but they're not big shifts, which is kind of to be expected in only 10 years. So one of the things that is very frustrating in habitat management and land management is that things happen slowly. But that's also one of the benefits, is that you can make some mistakes and it takes a while. So as you notice mistakes, you can adjust. So if we are making mistakes and these surveys are catching it, we're able to adapt what we're doing before we're causing significant damage. So 10-year repeat surveys will help us to be able to adjust any techniques that could be causing more harm than good. So, but we, those of us who started this initiative, are not going to actually see the end benefits of what we're doing. We will likely not see the oak regeneration that we are hoping we're setting up the system to do. And that's okay. For our insect surveys, there were over 1,500 total species of insects documented in the total of the 4 years of surveys. We were pretty excited because some of them were previously unknown on the properties. Part of that is because people don't really pay attention to bugs, but that's okay. There were a couple of species that were Tier 2 species of conservation concern by the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. And this is similar to the federal endangered and threatened species list, only it's at the state level. One of the interesting things about this survey is that the species composition between the baseline survey and last year had changed. So there were approximately 900 species for each survey, but they were different species. So it was really interesting when those results came out. One of the challenges for our insect surveyor is that there are very few published studies, and there really aren't that many people studying insects and oak habitats. So he's having a hard time finding other people to collaborate with and to find information on to be able to talk about these studies with. So he's not entirely sure what's going on and how to interpret some of these results. So there may be more questions than answers related to our insect surveys, but that's okay. That's part of the fun.
We do have another question in the chat.
Okay.
Do you have any updates about the wetland wildfire? Are the surrounding areas of Gifford Farm and or the wildlife management area affected?
I will answer questions about the wildfire after the presentation. So our monitoring, we have some less big scientific monitoring that we do on a more ongoing basis. So we have annual butterfly monitoring that takes place from April through October, and that actually happens weekly. So we have some volunteers who go out on the same trails every week and ID and count butterflies for us. We have some professors and researchers from UNO that do some bat surveys. There are some more informal plant surveys. We have some volunteers who use iNaturalists that go out and document plants. We have some informal deer surveys that happen as well. Our staff also does some tree canopy and density surveys on a 5-year basis. So what that does is that tells us the actual density of trees in acre plots, and that will help us to determine how much sunlight is hitting the forest floor. Some of the ideas that we would really love to have for monitoring, but we don't have the funding or we don't have the expertise for, is fungi. There aren't too many people who study fungi and can identify enough to be able to do specific surveys for that. We would love some floodplain specific monitoring as well. Soil monitoring would be pretty exciting. We also have some seeps at the base of our hills, and we would love to have some monitoring on that, because as our oak woodlands are improved, the water flow should also change in our seeps as well as the water quality, and we would love to be able to monitor that as well. So a couple of other aspects of our oak woodland restoration is education and outreach. Fontenelle Forest has 3 main pillars, and that's conservation, education, and recreation, and they go hand in hand. We need all 3 of those in order to be a full, successful organization. And our restoration is embedded into our education. So not only is it just in our education programs, but we have community meetings. So we attend and speak at conferences and seminars, and we hold advisory positions and serve on boards of other organizations. So we have quite a bit of community involvement. So multiple people in the organization in different departments attend outreach events. So we have blog posts about all kinds of different topics that have to do with our habitat management and all aspects of it. We do presentations and talks. We do neighbor visits and land assessments and post on social media. So as I mentioned earlier, habitat management and restoration specifically is long-term. So we don't expect to see the end results of what we're setting up. But we do have some other long-term examples of success who are ahead of us. So some examples who are ahead of us include Indian Cave State Park with the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, and also Nature Conservancy. So they are about 15 years ahead of us in some of their oak woodland restoration. Hitchcock Nature Center, Pottawatomie County Conservation, just across the river. They're about 10 years ahead of us in oak woodland management and conservation. And Timber Hill Oak Savanna, which is in central Iowa. They're about 25 years ahead of us in oak woodlands conservation and management, and they have seen quite a bit of the positive results that I had mentioned earlier that we have seen in the research that we had done. So it's pretty exciting to actually go visit a place that can showcase some of the science that we've read and be able to see it. In addition to the oak woodland management, we would like to tie that in with our other habitats to include floodplain restoration. but that would require significant assessment and funding and planning. We would need to do some targeted invasive control, and that would also include prescribed fire. We would need to set up monitoring and initiate that. And we would have to have some specific project phases and definitions to go along with that. So we can't do it by ourselves. And in the conservation world, as Conservation Nebraska knows, you have to work with others. So this is just a handful of some of the other organizations that we have worked with, specifically through Save the Oaks, but also in other avenues as well. Excuse me. So, yeah, this is just a handful of the organizations that we work with, even on a regular basis still. Either funding, technical support, partner work days, or research partners. So, how can you help? The biggest thing is getting out the word and support and understanding. So what we do, the on the ground management, is only one piece of the puzzle. We need community support. Ask questions, do your own research. What other things are out there? So one aspect of what we do that is widely accessible is native plants. Whether it's a container garden on your back porch or transforming your yard from yard grass into natives. It's supporting native habitats wherever you are. If you don't actually live here in the Omaha area, that's okay. Research what your native habitat should be and help support that with whatever you can do. Do you not have a place you can grow your own native habitat? Find another place around you that needs help and go help them. So there are little things in every place where you can help support whatever your native habitat is. All right, so I know we did have the floodplain question. So I'll go ahead and update on that. So real quick, it has not expanded. Excuse me. At least it hadn't expanded as of 4:30 this afternoon when I came off the fire. It's still about 30 acres and it is entirely on Fontenelle Forest property. So it is not an issue for Game and Parks or Gifford Farm as of now, and we're not expecting it to be. So did that answer that question, Promise?
I believe so.
Okay.
The next question is, you mentioned dirt versus soil. What is the difference?
Oh, great question. I love that question. So dirt has zero nutritional value for plants and it lacks the microbes and nutrients. Soil is full of all the good things that help support the plants and has the connectivity that helps things grow. It often has organic matter in it too. So dirt is the stuff that you sweep off your floor, basically.
The next one is, are the results of the plant and insect surveys available for public viewing to see the different species?
Great question. So we have a website called ffnaturesearch.org that lists the plants and animals and fungi that have been positively identified at Fontenelle Forest. So most of the stuff from the plant surveys are actually, I think all the stuff from the plant surveys are in there. I don't think the insects are in there because we don't have pictures of everything. So We don't have published results of the plant and insect surveys. But that is something I can look into.
Then the next one is, this has been very interesting. Thanks for hosting. I'm curious about your tests with burn parameters. I've heard traditional ecological knowledge, TEK, from people indigenous to the area that shows cooler burns can improve prairie seed germination. Have you looked into partnering with local indigenous communities for management plans?
That is not something that we have necessarily done yet, but that's not something that we are against.
All right, and that was the last question. We still have time for a few more questions. Also, we are going to launch our survey. If you guys want to take a minute to fill that out. And if you guys have any more questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We just got one more. Are there plans to introduce different fungi into restoration areas?
Ooh, that's a really good question. We do not have plans to introduce anything yet. We are kind of going with the wait and see approach to see what happens with the fungal components. Part of that is because we don't know what we currently have, and we don't know what's supposed to be here necessarily. So that's not something we're comfortable messing with. So at least the plant level, we have an idea of what was here and what we have now. So without having some fungal surveys and an idea of what we're supposed to have, that's not something we're comfortable messing with.
All right. If we don't have any additional questions, that will conclude tonight's webinar. If you haven't had the chance to complete the survey, please do so. If you would like to share this presentation with someone who can't attend tonight, or if you would like to watch it again, we will post the webinar online in the coming weeks. All right. Thank you so much for attending tonight and for supporting local conservation efforts. And a special thank you to Michelle for sharing your time, expertise, and passion with us this evening. We hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your night. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.